I'm pleased to have such an august group here. And Dean Sharp, I'd like for you to welcome us here.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. I'm pleased to welcome you here to the first session in a new series of town hall meetings sponsored by the Honors College here at the University of Alabama. We're pleased to have with us this evening a diverse and outstanding group of students who are specifically chosen by faculty and student organizations as participants in this event. We're also pleased to have several very special guests with us this evening who are interested in the constitutional reform here in the state of Alabama.
Yep. Thank you very much. Now, I know you're going to have to go, so we certainly, Senator Allen was here a few minutes ago, and he said this is the first of 3 more he had to go to. So busy people got a lot of places to go. So I really appreciate the dean being here today. We're pleased to have you, and if it might be easier if you sat on this side even. Yeah, if y'all want to sit over here in the back, I think you be more in front of here and just down at this end. So if you want to move up, everybody wants to move on over here. Let me tell you what this is. We're going to start off by having a presentation about the Constitution, after which you can ask a couple of questions, and then afterwards the whole focus is we're going to have a new Constitution. How can we make it happen? How can you make it happen? What is your advice on how we can implement this and have a new Constitution? So we have a class at the Honors College that is, the name of their class is Town Hall. We're putting on 3 Town Hall programs. This is the first of the 3. There are 3 coordinators tonight that's in charge of the program. Lauren Hardison, right here. Come on up here, Lauren. Harrison Martin, you'll see him over here. And David Martin. David. I said Martin. David Wilson. David Wilson right here. So he'll be taking your suggestions after you have come up with them, and then we'll present them back and get their input from what you suggest that we do to have a new Constitution. It's 111 years old. We've been talking about having a new one since 1916, so it's been a while. Lauren?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I have the distinct honor of introducing our distinguished speakers this evening. Senator Del Marsh is a graduate of Auburn University. He owns a company in Anniston and is a member of the Greater Anniston Business and Professional Association. Senator Marsh is the father of 2 with his wife, Ginger. He has represented the 12th District of Alabama in the Alabama State Senate since 1998 as a Republican. In 2010, his colleagues elected Senator Marsh President Pro Temp of the Alabama State Senate. He was the sponsor of the Senate Joint Resolution creating the Constitution Reform Commission. And then we also have with us Governor Albert Brewer, and Governor Brewer is a graduate of the University of Alabama. He has served as the Speaker of the Alabama State House of Representatives, Lieutenant Governor, and ultimately Governor from 1968 to 1971 as a Democrat. Governor Brewer currently serves as a professor at the Cumberland School of Law at Samford University, and as the chair of the Constitution Reform Commission. He was recently recognized by the University of Alabama's College of Communication and Information Sciences and inducted into its Hall of Fame. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have nowhere else to go, so I'm not going to be running out at all. I've been in the legislature since '98. As you all know, probably in this room, there was a big changeover in 2010. And I'm not going to get into partisan, but the Republicans got control, and a lot of things we felt had to be dealt with. And since '98, being in the legislature, and I ran a little history, which is interesting because, as we mentioned about back in 1915, Governor O'Neill attempted the rewrite of the Constitution. Of course, Governor Brewer attempted it in '69. Big Jim Folsom attempted it in 46 to 55. You could just go down the list, and it's been attempted all the way through 2003. And what I wanted to be able to do, and the reason I passed the resolution, when we took over in 2010, there were certain things that kind of just stood out of things that have been talked about forever, and then why can't you get them done? And I think one reason you can't get things done in the legislature, and it's a big reason you can't, is you've got so many things to try to deal with and so many issues being talked about at any given time. You talk about them all session long, but nothing ever happens because you don't focus on something. So speaking with the Speaker of the House, Mike Hubbard, and I told him I just felt that the Constitution was an issue that we could tackle, among other things that we have tackled, and the timing was right. And I felt, based again on what I had seen in the years I had been there, that an article-by-article approach of the rewrite is the way to do it. And once we put a very diverse group of people together from across the state, that on all sides of the aisle, different interests, and then that group wisely chose Governor Brewer to be the chairman of this group because of his knowledge and past history, which he'll talk about in a minute. Now, I'm not an attorney. But and a lot of time in the Constitution, you read into it, it's legal jargon. It's hard for me to understand. So, in addition to having the governor involved in this, I was extremely excited about the Law Institute and Bob's involvement. That I've worked with Bob for years, and when I talked to Bob about the resolution and getting this going, he brought a box out. I mean, a couple boxes of just history of where they had tried through the years to do something. So the fact that the Law Institute has been so involved in this process and been facilitators in this through this process is why we're so close, in my opinion, on November 6th to passing two of the articles and dealing with racist language in the Constitution as well. And I'm very optimistic, and I'm excited tonight because we know the importance of the 6th, because if we have success on the 6th, in my opinion, we are finally going to get this done, and I believe by the end of this quadrennium, we will have the Constitution rewritten through the article process. So tonight, I'm very curious to hear, after you break into groups, what you think may help us get this done on the 6th. We want any help we can get. We've been working with editorial staff. We've gone across the state. I feel really good about it. I really do. But I'll feel even better, I think, after tonight and hearing your input, what we might do to move us along for that. And with that, because I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for any questions that may come up, I want to introduce you my good friend, Governor Brewer.
Thank you, Senator Marsh, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your interest in this subject. Let me say hurriedly, I don't have time to even begin this, and I've been involved in it. One of the first votes I ever cast in the legislature was in the administration of Governor Big Jim Folsom in 1955, and it was a vote for a constitutional convention. Big Jim called this a fair vote convention. What in the world does that mean? He had run for governor on a fair vote convention, was elected without a runoff, and probably not 5% of the people knew what a fair vote convention was. Governor Folsom was concerned about reapportionment and the allocation of representation in our legislature. And I can remember that he used to illustrate the problem two pieces of cast iron pipe, not a lead pipe, one about a 1/2-inch pipe and one about a 2-inch pipe. And he used Wilcox County as one example and Coleman County, his home county then, as the other. He said that Wilcox County was like the 2-inch pipe. It had one senator and 2 representatives and 10,000 people. Coleman County was like the 1/2-inch pipe. It had a third of a senator, that is, it shared a senator with 2 other counties, and it had 1 representative. And he used that to illustrate that Wilcox County could draw 4 times as much water as Coleman County because of the malapportionment of our legislature. Well, that was my introduction, at any rate, to the Alabama Constitution. In the legislature and as governor, I saw the hamstringing of this Constitution in so many areas of state government, made it impossible for the government to respond to problems and opportunities that we had. And we really don't have time tonight to make the case for constitutional reform. I think we're all interested in constitutional revision or constitutional reform, or we wouldn't be here tonight. And certainly a lot of you have devoted a lot of hours to this particular subject. There are two ways to revise the Constitution. One is by amendment. This has to go through the legislature. The legislature must propose a constitutional amendment. It must be submitted to the people and ratified by the people, and then it becomes a part of the Constitution. Now, we ought to be familiar with this process in Alabama because we've done it over 800 times. In addition to the number of times we turned down proposed amendments. So we're familiar with that. There's another alternative, and every constitution we've had originated with a convention, from the first one in 1819 to the sixth one in 1901. But again, we have to go through the legislature, and the legislature has to submit to the people a proposal for a convention stating the details about when the convention will convene, how delegates will be selected, and so on, about the mechanics of the operation. Since 1901, we've had calls for conventions. Governor O'Neill did one. Other governors have advocated conventions, and each time it's been turned down. The opponents of convention have said, we don't really trust the delegates to a convention. We don't know what they'll do when they get here. We don't know what the special interest influence will be under these circumstances. Let's do article by article, and then we can hold the legislature accountable, and we'll get the ultimate decision to vote for or against a particular amendment. And so generally this has been the most popular method. Now, there is an office for a constitutional commission in this process. And I want to mention it to you because it's not provided for by law except for a special law creating one. We don't have a provision in the organic law of Alabama saying you may have a constitutional revision commission. But the legislature can create one. I think the governor can create one by executive order. Governor Riley did 10 years ago. And Governor Kilby did in the early 20s. Your hometown mate, and so on. Why have a commission? When I became governor, several states were looking at constitutional revision, including ours. And the experience in those states, and I remember particularly in Louisiana, was that they had a convention. The convention produced a product, a new constitution, submitted it to the people for ratification, and everybody who was against any single part of that Constitution opposed it at the polls, and it was resoundingly defeated. We decided at that time that our best chance of getting constitutional revision was to use the amendment process, an article by article process, and to develop a product. Here we suggested a commission to make recommendations for revision of articles of the Constitution. The legislature approved this. We appointed a commission in '69. They met for 4 years, and in 1973 made their recommendations for a new Constitution. Our charge to them was to make your recommendations such that each article is a standalone article, that one could be approved and another rejected without destroying the interrelationship within the document. And we had a diligent commission. It was appointed by the governor and did a fine work product. In fact, we're using that work product in connection with our studies today on recommendations for the new for the Constitution or for the article by article provision. And there was one problem with the whole process. An election intervened in 1970, and and the people, I won't say by the almost unanimous will, but anyway, I was asked to leave, and another governor came in, and he didn't have any affinity for constitutional reform, and really the effort sort of died out. We did get the new judicial article through the leadership of Senator Heflin, then Chief Justice Heflin, and also annual sessions of the legislature that came from recommendations of the commission, but that was pretty much it. I heartily endorse the commission. Senator, I commend you for your foresight in the approach you've given. And the resolution that Senator Marsh sponsored did this. It sort of broadened the area of appointing authority so that the governor and the Speaker of the House and the President Pro Tem of the Senate, the three leading constitutional officers in the legislative and executive branches, would each appoint members to the commission. Then in addition to that, legislators who had responsibilities in the area of constitutional government serve on the commission as well. And so we have a 16-member commission. I don't know how many times we met, several over the past year, over a year. We have recommendations for a new Article 9, new articles on banking and corporations and Amendments 9 and 10, which will be on the ballot in November. We've also endorsed the Amendment 4 to take the racist language out of our Constitution, and so on. We are proceeding now with the consideration of revising Article 4. The legislative article, which is important to us because it embraces the subject of home rule. And then from there, we'll go into the executive article and so on through the list. Off our plate at this stage anyway is any consideration of fiscal matters, taxation, and so forth, because that could be we think a death knell for a new constitution at this stage. So we're doing it article by article. The commission is working hard. We have subcommittees on each of the articles. We have two subcommittee meetings next week. I believe it's next week. And then early in November, I know we have some, and then the full commission again. We're hoping that we'll have to the legislature when it begins its regular session in February, that we'll have recommendations for a new Article 4, revised Article 4, and during the course of the year, we hope to complete the recommendations for all articles that we have. I've taken too long to describe what we're trying to do, but I believe it's viable. I believe it can work, and I think you have a role to play. One of the most heartening things that we've had, and several of you have been attending commission meetings, has been the number of people, citizens, who have come as we discussed various articles and have taken the opportunity to express their views to the commission. Now, some of the views were pretty bizarre, and some of them are pretty far out, but it makes for entertainment and interest on the part of all of us, and it's helpful to us. It's helpful to all of us to do. So we welcome you into the effort and seek your input, your advice, and your counsel in that regard. Thank you.
Do people have any questions of the two gentlemen?
What do you think in terms of the proposals that you will be making? How will you deal with opposition that may come up? I know you said that you prefer the article by article because people can't gang up on one provision and defeat everything, and I think that is a good aspect of that particular approach. But I noticed that even today that Senator Sanders, who's been a distinguished member of the Senate for many years, that he has come out actually against the amendment that would delete the racist language because he feels like it's not complete enough, like the one that he proposed some years ago. But how are you going to deal with that? Obviously, I think that we should get rid of all racist language because we're moving ahead as a state on a non-racial basis, and certainly I find it discouraging that people, even African Americans, would oppose deleting racist language, because the amendment that's put before the people is not exactly like you would like for it to be.
Dr. Bill Stewart, who has written extensively on this subject, we're pleased to have you here.
Let me say, Dr. Stewart wrote a book on the 73 Commission report, a very fine analysis, and it's in a library near you, so I commend it to you, and it's not too long. He gives a nice history of the convention, of the commission, and some anecdotes about it and so on. Bill, I share your concern. I could not believe yesterday when I heard the news about the opposition to Amendment 4, and particularly where it was coming from. It's inexplicable. And from a logistical standpoint, how do you respond to this kind of thing? It's awfully easy to say, well, this racist language is bad, it ought to be out, and so on. And somebody says, well, it doesn't do what it says it will do this instead. It's going to have a negative effect on the operation of our public schools or whatever. And then you're put in the role, if you favor the amendment, of going into great detail and explaining why their concept is erroneous and so on. And when you have to make a long, detailed explanation of something like that, your cause is usually lost. It's just a lot easier to say, well, I'm not going to take a chance, I'll vote against it. Now, I've been encouraged. I haven't seen any editorial support, I haven't seen any editorial support for the negative view on this. Most queries I've seen have been raising the issue. Why would this particular individual be opposed to this amendment, which looks to be consistent with everything he's ever stood for? Right. And so on. And so I think we just have to see how it plays out and hope that people will really analyze.
And may I add to that, Governor? I'm not an attorney, as I said earlier, but Senator Orr, who was a sponsor of that piece of legislation, is an attorney, very competent individual. He was literally shocked when the response came out a few days ago. And one of the first things he did was go to the Law Institute and ask the Law Institute to analyze the amendment and verify that, in fact, it did what we intended to do, and that was strictly remove the racist language. And the conclusion of that report was exactly that. It did nothing but remove the racist language. And so I think, as I was on the radio the other day and made reference to that report, and I want to thank the Law Institute to get it right on top of that. But I'm hopeful that we will pass that article along, that amendment along with the others, because it needs to be passed. And I'm as with the governor, I haven't seen this groundswell of support for opposition to it. And I quite honestly haven't seen a groundswell of support for opposition to any of the amendments, and I'm pleased to say that.
Yeah, that's good.
Professor Martha Morgan.
Martha Morgan. I'm a retired professor from the University of Alabama Law School. And I don't question the intent of many of the supporters of Amendment 4, but I think if you will read this document, you will see that the argument that while it does remove some of the racist language from Amendment 111, it leaves in and in fact would seem to then constitutionally re-enshrine some of the most racist history and language from 1954. And so is misleading in how it's described on the ballot and is unnecessary if all it seeks to do, at least we would argue, and is therefore the argument is it's dangerous and unnecessary, and that it does matter, even if the rights under the original Section 256, at least the Alabama Supreme Court has said, are not the Supreme Court. The judiciary can't enforce them. It still makes a lot of difference to have a right rather than just to go to the legislature and say, we would like for you to please follow the policy of Alabama of
Well, one of the things
promoting
that
education to the extent of your willingness. It's important to be able to say as Alabamians that the legislature has a duty to support public schools. And that's a difference, whether it's judicially enforceable or not. Rights matter. On Amendment 4, but I do urge you to read it and know that the people that are making this, you know, we're not questioning the motives of the people that put it on the ballot.
Professor Morgan?
But you do have to wonder when Alpha is running ads supporting this. I mean, when has Alpha been funding something concerned about removing racism?
Thank you, Professor Morgan. But let me say that.
Sorry, I shouldn't have added that.
Okay. All right. Well, let me say she's been very much of a zealot for many years on this, and I got to hand it to you. But let me tell you, next year, and I'm really glad to see Uacth Latham, who's the director of the Alabama Law Institute, he'll tell you that next year, this commission is taking head-on that article up. 256 is a part of the section of the article in education that will be addressed. So, you know, that's a head-on argument. Forget about all this other stuff, whether it's right or wrong. That'll be addressed directly and not indirectly. And come and talk about it. All right, another question before we take a break here. Yes, sir.
I just had a follow-up. Full disclosure, I'm David Pinkleton. I'm the chairperson of Conservatives for Good Government. We've actually formed a statewide pact to address all 11 statewide constitutional amendments. We have actually endorsed a yes vote on Amendment 4, 9, and 10. And I was just wondering, Senator Marsh and Governor Brewer, if you could give your thoughts. Recently, earlier this week, the Alabama Education Association actually came out and recommended a no vote on Amendment 4, and obviously they're one of the largest interest groups in the state. So I was wondering what effect, if any, that would have on possibly causing this amendment to fail.
You please take that one.
There again, that was when I noticed the paper had come out. Of course, I know Dr. Mabry, know him well, and my first thought was, if he had an issue, why wasn't it brought up way back when we were dealing with this legislation? And apparently, someone has come to Dr. Mabry with a view that it could be possibly damaging to education. There again, I don't think it is. All that Senator Orr was attempting to do was to remove the racist language, as we just talked about. 256 will be dealt with in its entirety in next year. But I just don't buy the argument. We were talking earlier tonight, trying to figure out what it is about. It's almost like there's something going on.
Arguably, you say, why do we need it? It's all the courts that have ruled on it, statutes from Congress, so on, have all said this kind of thing is out. It doesn't have any legal effect. Why do we need to do anything? If I were an industry recruiter in the state of Georgia, and I had a prospect who was also considering Alabama, I would say, I want you just to look at the culture of that state as reflected in its Constitution of 1901. This is how the people felt. This is the purpose they had when they wrote this document. Do you want to go invest your hundreds of millions of plant and equipment in a state like that where you don't know what's going to happen? I would beat us to death with that language. And so getting it out seems to me to be worthwhile, even if it doesn't have any legal effect.
Harrison, tell us about how we're going to solve this.
To address breakout groups, if you will address your attention to your name tag, I believe we are ready to go ahead and break out. So if you will follow your group leaders and have discussion with them.
Council, kids, the only Tuesday meetings, and I'm waiting for it to roll around, so there's some kind of budget Personally, I thought there were issues that were more, in my opinion, were more problematic in the Constitution, like he was talking about education. But I was never aware that there was racist language in the Constitution, or that we're doing something to alleviate that problem. That was an eye-opener to me.
Anyone else? Yeah, I was able to read, with some of the documents that were sent to us, to read a little bit more about just the.
These are why people like it, these are why people don't like it. But it's so hard to orchestrate that if people
So
don't want
I
to listen to, like, if people don't want to listen to your message, they're just not, they're just gonna shut you down.
School for your race, but.
And part of it's just what the culture of the state, to be honest.
Says that
I know you were speaking about
school,
apathy and change. I mean, it's just not a part of the state's history. We can move in like a direction, but it takes us more time normally, just in various issues. I'm not sure how you combat statewide apathy, like to your point.
Okay, David Wilson will take your recommendations. You can call on them any order you want to. By the way, here's copies of Governor Brewer's, the recommendations of that commission. They're back here. If you'd like to pick them up, they're back on the table.
Hey y'all, my name's David Wilson. Appreciate y'all coming tonight and participating in our town hall. Once again, I want to say thank you to Senator Marsh and Governor Brewer for participating tonight. Now we're going to get to the portion of the program where we're going to share all the ideas, all the wonderful ideas that the different groups came up with to assist in addressing issues facing our Constitution. So we will start out with the Blue Group. And if the spokesperson from the Blue Group would like to stand up and share with the rest of the group y'all's recommendations. And Stuart, if you want to come on down to the front.
All right, in our little small group, we're kind of talking about ways home rule and finance, or the financial limitations set in the Constitution right now, could maybe be meshed together, but at the same time on a level that would be legitimate to pass, or actually have a chance of being changed within the Constitution and by the amendment process. So we were kind of talking about what are small changes at the same time would be the baby steps to further change, kind of what Governor Brewer was talking about. You don't want to go too big, because you might get shot down, but start small and maybe get support throughout the process. So we were talking about how maybe to focus on taxation within counties, the tax rates that counties can set and the money they gain directly from those taxes from their citizens, maybe have that power to spend and set those rates shift to the county. Not money from out of the county, not money from the state, but county taxes specifically from inside the county. That way you can make the argument that no one else is affected by the levying of these taxes, the collection of these taxes, what this money is spent on, but there's no reason to have to go through Montgomery to get the tax rates. And then, so I thought sales tax would be the best one to go after. Property tax, that instantly gets a little problem from the interest groups and in the state, but property taxes could be by county rather than set by the state government. I'm pretty positive right now that's the case, that the state government sets the property tax rates, which in some counties where there's a lot of timberland, a lot of that kind of stuff that are really low, but it hurts counties like Jefferson County that can't raise on a whim without amendments the property tax level, let alone what that money would go to. So we were kind of starting small, especially with sales tax and other ways, and hopefully property tax, to control the counties to spend the money how they would like to. And that way we can kind of address home rule and the economic issue. Thank you.
Next, can we have a representative from the yellow group? And it was the yellow group, right? Yeah. Yellow group, right.
Okay, the yellow group talked about increasing awareness for problem with home rule as well and taxation. So it's all the same things Stuart said. We just like to see it be addressed, even if it's something that can't get passed. We just want it to be addressed openly. We want to have a conversation about it. We think it could have its own town hall, even about the topic, but it's just something that's kind of taboo to talk about. And the yellow group really wants it to be in the forefront, wants it to be mentioned, and just really wants there to be an open conversation about taxation and the rule of home rule. And then we also had another suggestion from the yellow group.
It was very similar with that. We felt that in terms of getting constitutional reform passed, overall, we need to make more of an effort to educate the citizens about what exactly we're trying to do. We feel that there are a number of many citizens don't really understand what it is that they're voting on. They haven't heard discussion and heard the two sides of it. It was thrown around that there needs to be more of an ad campaign or marketing to try and help voters understand what the issue is, why we need change, and so that we can effectively pass it.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Senator, Governor. In the Green Group, a lot of our talk was also focused on marketing and awareness. However, we think we've come up with a slant towards some specificity. What we want to do, one of the things we talked about was finding a specific name, a face, a place, some sort of concrete symbol that we can really associate with an issue that's as abstract as constitutional reform is in the minds of the layman citizen of Alabama. And I think we came up with a good idea regarding that, in that we should capitalize on the reputation that we have as a state and the reputation that our Constitution has. I think constitutional law scholars, certainly in the state and around the country and even throughout the world, recognize the length of our Constitution and the all the amendments and the convoluted nature and the sort of the infighting that's been going on since its inception in 1901. So if we could make a campaign that really brings that to the forefront, and it shows all the problems and it shows all the negativity and all the political conflict that's arisen throughout the years, that we could actually pull in a lot of support from a campaign like that, or from a campaign that draws on Alabama's long history with race relations and things like that. We're looking at now. We're only just looking at in 2012, really effacing all of the racist language. Well, not all of the racist language, but the significant racist language from the Constitution. If we could really draw on the reputation that our state and our Constitution already have, to bring attention to it and to have it addressed, then we think that would be the most effective awareness campaign we could generate. So that was our idea in the Green Group.
And I was a member of the Red Group, and unless anybody else suddenly wants to talk now, anybody, then I will be sharing our recommendations to the group. First, after discussion, we found that we did support the section by section addressing of the different amendments. We feel like a large constitution convention could possibly end up in our state being a lot of work that could be shot down all too quickly for everything to go through at one time. So we definitely supported the amendment by amendment process. Another thing that we talked about was the tax codes, and we felt that some of the tax codes were disproportional, and we supported looking into other southern states that have changed their tax codes significantly over time, and try to replicate some of the things that they've done to try to make our tax system a little bit more fair. The other thing is we were very passionate about home rule, and we know that's kind of a cliche, and it's talked about a lot, but we feel like it's a cliche for a reason. And we really are really supportive of trying to put as much power to the local municipalities and to the counties, and try to alleviate some of the pressures off the state legislature from having to worry about small budgeting issues and things on like different local levels. The last thing that we talked about was we really supported, like the other groups, we really supported the education of voters, and we feel like that's a huge issue. Sometimes in our state, people in any state, anywhere around, just human nature is you might not want change necessarily. And if you're not really sure about something and it says you want to change this, our human nature is to say, no, we won't change that. We'll leave it as it is. We feel like a huge part of being able for constitutional reform to really be successful in the state is going to take voter education and also combating voter apathy. And we feel like it could be a very significant part of the commission the Uacth are a part of to really make that one of the missions of the commission, not only to look at different ways to improve the Constitution, but also how can we educate the voters on what that means, what that actually means when those things happen. So for that to become a part of the commission, we felt like would be very, very beneficial to the state and beneficial to all the great work that y'all are doing. So those were our thoughts on that. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me touch on the things that were said here tonight. And taxation was left on the table because if we had started out with taxation, we would have gotten nowhere. I can assure you of that if you look at the past history. What I think is happening by this commission and the work they are doing, in my opinion, part of what they're doing is building trust. They're taking it article by article. Let me tell you something else about the average Alabamian. They're raising a family, they're making a living, and a lot of them don't have time to really follow the constitutional revision of the state. And if they're going to follow it, allow them to follow it in pieces. And that's what the article by article approach is doing. And we're working with the papers right now and the media across the state is, as I said again, I'm not an attorney, but getting this in layman's terms so that the average citizen can understand what changes are really taking place in these article by article revisions. And that's what's happening now. We've got a staff that's been putting it in layman's terms. It's going out to all the editorial boards to educate the public with the hopes that, you know, the day could come that these more technical issues, the more sensitive issues like home rule and taxation can be addressed because you've built up a platform through the trust of the people with these type groups to want to look into those areas. So that's what I'm hopeful for, and that's why I think this is the best approach. Now, and I've got to ask you to do this. The power, I see some of the power from this group, and I thank you for your vision and where you're going, because we have a lot of the same visions, just we got to find a way to get there. But you have a social media power that is unequaled, okay? I know. So what I'm asking you to do is, I know you reach not only fellow students here at the University of Alabama, you've reached Auburn, you reached Troy, you reached your friends across this state. And for us to work together to build that momentum, to get where we need to be, to rewrite this Constitution, we all need to work together. And I think you can have a huge impact through that social media. Let your friends know where you were tonight, what you did, the importance of this November 6th vote on these amendments. Help us get this done, because you could truly say, look at the history of the attempts to do this that have failed. You can be part of the success of rewriting this Constitution. Tonight, you can be part of that. So I want to urge you to use those skills of social media networks throughout this state to get this accomplished.
That's a grand idea, Senator. I like the idea of communication, of you with others, and maybe there's a way we could get the Secretary of State, or in cooperation with the Alabama Law Institute or something, to make this an ongoing effort, so that not only does the work of the commission get distributed in a condensed, understandable form, but that future efforts along the same line, proposed constitutional amendments in the legislature, for example, would be publicized in the same manner, and people could have the opportunity to comment on those. I see the potential here as being unlimited, and I commend Group 4 on raising this issue.
Now, one of the things that has been brought up on several of them has to do with home rule. Now, next year, that's one of the issues that they're currently working on, is what to do with local government. And you know, that's a really good point. If we had these groups talk about, as our committee, as the commission develops these approaches, maybe these people ought to be exposed to it up front and not after it's already written. So you could have input as well to that part. And you could tell people at Auburn and at Samford, Birmingham Southern, and other places what's going on. And I think that would be that was a good suggestion.
Well, it's a good program for example. I'm going to oversimplify the home rule question, but essentially it's this: when the legislature or the convention, the Constitution gives the local government the authority to write its own charter or to develop its own powers and so on. Should that be permissive or should it be mandatory? Basic fundamental issue for the commission. Are we going to let the local governments opt in to home rule or opt out of a mandatory home rule? Do you have an opinion about it? Express it. We've been hearing people expressing it. There are other issues involved, and there's tweaking of some of these issues, but ultimately I think I'm going to have to vote on the commission on one or the other of these two choices. Which is better? Do you want to make your county commissioner be a county commissioner? Or do you want to let him abdicate if he wants to and take care of the roads? Those kinds of things.
I know we need to put in our commission in these meetings, there needs to be an official tweeter.
We got one.
An official tweeter.
She's our tweeter.
And get the comments instantly.
Well, you know, not only that is, Ellie is not only tweeting, but she is also going to develop Facebook, and we've talked today about having our own homepage for students.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be another way we can develop and let people know what y'all are doing or what's being done. Yes.
Along with what y'all are saying, if you could hold maybe another town hall, something like this, on an issue before you start deciding on that issue. So if you're going to address home rule, you could come have a town hall and have the issues about home rule that you want to address in your committee. Have this town hall, have an open discussion about it, take everyone's opinions, and then go with that into the decision making, rather than making a decision and having us discuss what we like and dislike about it after the process.
Now, each participant here was sent background information on what's going on. So hopefully you opened your attachment and knew what was there. But that was a good idea, and we're progressing on it. Another thought that you'd like to ask a question about? That was good, Ellie. Yes, sir.
Concerning getting the word out there in social media, we all know social media is every day just getting more and more involved in everybody's lives. Facebook just recently hit 1 billion active users from across the world. But from my opinions of that, no citizen past the age of, let's say, 45, 50 is really as active in social media as we are. College students.
No white-haired guys.
So it's wisdom. But a large portion of Alabama citizens are my parents, my grandparents. My grandmother doesn't have a Facebook account. She doesn't tweet. So they're a big part of what Alabama's about, what Alabama has been about, and the kind of everything that Alabama is known for is because of them and their voice. So how do you get your ideas and the information that you're trying to spread to the state out to them, out to people who might not have access to a computer? The Black Belt, one of the poorest areas in the country, might not have as many access to computers, television, even newspaper. So how do you get the information about the constitutional amendments out to those citizens?
And that's where I was going in that I realized that you're probably correct, over 45, the social media isn't the big deal. That's where the traditional newspapers, editorial pages. Another thing I have to bring to our folks' attention all the time, how many of you have a landline? Okay, not many. So this traditional form of these calls before the election of get out, it's not reaching. But that's why when I knew I was coming here tonight, I knew that I was going to be begging y'all to use your social media, because no, it won't reach your parents, but it will reach this group of voters that could make the difference. I think we can reach the parents. I think because they're going to do the traditional sources, but those traditional sources, where many times won't reach you. So that's what we are trying at all angles. Trying to reach everyone we can possibly. And another thing, to your point, the older generation, the parents, seniors, they're the ones that percentage-wise, are the high voters. I mean, they vote. And unfortunately, your age group is not. And we need to change that. And we need to get involved. I think the way that we might could change that is one thing if I send a letter out and to one of you and you get it, and I say, well, you need to support these amendments we need to rewrite the Constitution. That's not going to go as far, sir, as if you send that text to a friend that says this is important, we need to get this done. So we've all got to work on this. A lot of times it's who makes the call, and you've got to make that call.
You remember in class we talked about the percentage of students that go vote. 6 years ago, in the principal box on campus, 16% of the people in that box voted. 4 years ago was a presidential year, 55% voted. 2 years ago, 19% voted. Now, we need the 55%
We need the 55
out voting again.
Right.
How do you do that?
Well,
yes, ma'am. I just have a question. So, from what y'all said, you said that you were a Republican and you were a Democrat. So, do you feel like the changes that need to be made in this Constitution are like a bipartisan, both parties going in for this, or do you feel like that can also?
No, I think it's bipartisan. Absolutely. This is strictly about what's good, in my opinion. I think the governor will echo this. What's good for the state of Alabama and its citizens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have not seen anything that I would consider partisan in the proceedings at all.
I haven't in the proceedings. I'm quick to say there's some small-minded people who would oppose an initiative from the Republicans because they're Democrats, or who would oppose a Democrat initiative because they're Republicans. Yeah, we have some of that. Hopefully they offset each other.
I've got to hand it to Senator Marsh and the Governor Bentley and Speaker Hubbard. They appointed people that it's really making a difference. We have somebody that's head of the Tea Party. We have somebody that's connected to the Gay and Lesbian Alliance. We have someone that has run Democratic campaigns. We have a person that's clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, we've got such a diverse group on there. I don't think I could have imagined a group that was that diverse who's been unified on everything so far.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think you're exactly right. If we can get that word out before it gets to the vote, I think that's key.
Mm-hmm.
Let me suggest, you young people are supporting constitutional reform for a reason. Have you articulated that reason? Can you go to one of your friends and say, we need to do something about this Constitution in our own self-interest? It's inhibiting what I can do when I graduate and start looking for employment or career or business or something here. People are affected by things that affect them personally. And this Constitution affects every one of us personally. I think it's a very worthwhile exercise to define the ways it does affect us and look at how negative the impact is of those considerations in our lives. That's a suggestion as an ongoing thing for you. It'd be great if you communicate with your your friend or your best buddy and say, you know what this Constitution does? It prohibits me from doing this and thus and so on. I just think it's effective, can be helpful to you.
I'll take two other questions anyone have or statements you'd like to make, then we're going to call it out. Yes, ma'am.
It's not really a question, it's more of a suggestion. I brought it up when we were in our small groups, but another thing about getting the word out there, you were saying earlier that you're more receptive to someone your own age. And I know that a lot of the organizations on campus, Greek and non-Greek, have meetings. And I don't see why we don't have people go and represent this constitutional reform at these meetings and give them out to the masses. Because if we want the percentages, that's how we have to get it out there.
And I know that people, like, it's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, but I know I ignore that stuff sometimes. And it might be more personal if someone's actually talking to someone about it.
That's a great idea. Along those lines, that's what you see some organizations like home builders, retailers, Alpha. I guarantee you they are sending a newsletter to their members specifically about this. You know, if everyone in this room and these organizations that are around campus, and I don't know all of them, but there's several, if everyone would say, okay, that's going to be my job. I'm going to go talk to this group before November 6th and say, I went to this town meeting the other night, town hall meeting, and this is what I learned, and we all need to support this. But we can't do that. But this group can, and you know what those meetings are. You know when they meet. You can organize that, and it would be very powerful if you could do that.
Well, thank you very much.
Set those right there. But we can one together for your call. Here we go.
Students not going to be a call to listen to somebody. They can't relate.
I agree, and that's